They say every small town has its secrets, but in this one, the most dangerous secret was standing right behind the counter of a quiet roadside diner, pouring coffee with a steady hand and a forced smile. Her name was Emily Carter. To the locals, she was just the sweet, polite waitress who never raised her voice, who always remembered your order, and who closed up the diner every night with the jukebox humming low in the background. But beneath that calm exterior, Emily carried something no one could have guessed, something that made her heart race every time the door swung open and the bell above it jingled. And one late autumn night, when three strangers walked in wearing the unmistakable aura of Navy SEALs, Emily's carefully built life began to unravel. Stay with me, because once you know her secret, you'll understand why this story doesn't just belong to her. It belongs to anyone who's ever run from the past, praying it never catches up. The diner was the kind of place where time stood still. Red vinyl booths with cracks in the corners, laminated menus that smelled faintly of grease, and a coffee pot that never seemed to empty. Emily had built a rhythm there. Pour, smile, nod, move on. She loved that no one asked questions. The regulars talked about fishing trips, old ball games, or who'd won at the county fair last year, and Emily just listened. She liked being invisible. But that night, the air shifted when the three men came in. They weren't locals. You could see it in the way they scanned the room. Eyes sharp, movements precise, like they'd trained their whole lives to notice things most people missed. One of them, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar along his jaw, locked eyes with Emily. And in that single look, her chest tightened. Because she recognized him, her hands trembled as she wiped down the counter, trying to look busy. The man didn't say a word at first, just watched her with a quiet intensity that stripped away the walls she'd built. The other two SEALs ordered coffee, laughing low between themselves like men who'd seen too much and learned to hide it with humor. But the scarred man never laughed. He didn't look away, and Emily knew, in that moment, her secret wasn't safe anymore. Rehook. What could a waitress possibly be hiding that even Navy SEALs would cross the country to uncover? Years earlier, Emily had been someone else entirely. Her real name wasn't Carter. It was Elizabeth Hayes. She had grown up in a world far removed from greasy diners and small towns. Her father was a defense contractor, her mother a high-ranking analyst. Elizabeth had been raised among classified files, encrypted calls, and guarded homes. But one night, one violent, unshakable night, everything collapsed. There had been a break-in, a planned assassination masked as a burglary gone wrong. Elizabeth had been the only survivor. She ran, not just from the killers, but from the government agents who whispered that maybe the attack hadn't been random, that maybe someone inside her own family's world had orchestrated it. Alone, terrified, she built a new name, a new life, and settled in the kind of town where nobody asked too many questions. She thought she'd buried Elizabeth Hayes forever. But now, looking at the scarred seal across the diner, she knew the grave she'd dug for her past was crumbling. Coffee, the man finally said, his voice gravelly, as if every word carried the weight of war. She poured, steadying her hand, praying he wouldn't see it shake. "Haven't seen you around before," she whispered, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer. He just stared, then finally leaned closer. "You're a long way from where you're supposed to be, Elizabeth." Her blood ran cold. Rehook. Imagine thinking you buried your old life, only to have it spoken back to you by a stranger who knows too much. The bell above the door jingled again. A trucker walked in, and Emily exhaled, grateful for the distraction. But inside, her mind was spiraling. How did he know her name? Why now? She glanced at the clock. Midnight. The roads outside were empty, the town asleep. No one would hear. If something went wrong. Her instinct screamed to run, but she couldn't. Running hadn't saved her before. It had only delayed the inevitable. The seal leaned back, finally taking a sip of coffee. "We're not here to hurt you," he said, though his eyes told her there was more. We're here because you're not safe. And neither is this town. His words struck like a blade. For years, Emily had tried to convince herself the past wouldn't find her. But if the Navy SEALs had tracked her down, it meant someone else could too. Someone worse. She pressed her hands against the counter to steady herself. Why now? After all this time, she whispered. The second SEAL, younger, with restless eyes, spoke up. Because they finally know you're alive. And they're coming. Emily's heart pounded so loud she thought it might give her away. Her diner, the one place that had felt safe, suddenly became a trap. Every window felt like a target. Every shadow outside felt like an enemy watching. The SEALs knew it too. That's why they had come. Not to expose her, not to arrest her, but to protect her. Rehook. But who was coming for Emily? And why would Navy SEALs risk everything to keep her safe? The night stretched into a blur of questions and half-answers. They told her bits and pieces. A network of mercenaries had resurfaced, the same ones, tied to her family's murder. They had intel that pointed to her as unfinished business. What she had buried wasn't just her name. It was evidence, something her father had hidden, something only Elizabeth Hayes could lead them to. The truth hit like a tidal wave. She wasn't just a victim. She was a key. And the people chasing her weren't going to stop. Not now, not. Ever.by dawn. The diner's neon sign flickered off, and the SEALs guided her outside. The streets were quiet, the town unaware of the storm about to hit. Emily looked back at the diner, the only home she'd known in years, and her chest ached. But she knew she couldn't stay. She had to face the truth. The next days were a blur of safe houses, coded messages, and long silences broken only by whispered plans. Yet amid the chaos, Emily began to see the SEALs for who they were. Not just soldiers, but men carrying their own scars. The one with the jaw scar, his name was Marcus, watched her with a kind of unspoken understanding. He knew what it meant to lose everything and keep moving. She found herself drawn to that quiet strength. And though fear pressed against her every step, Marcus's presence anchored her. But the mercenaries weren't far. One night, under the cover of rain, they struck. A safe house window shattered, gunfire splitting the silence. Emily froze, but Marcus grabbed her, shielding her with his own body as bullets tore through the walls. The SEALs moved like shadows, precise and deadly, but Emily could feel the weight of her secret pressing harder. She wasn't just someone to protect. She was the reason they were in danger. When the shooting stopped, one SEAL lay wounded, blood pooling beneath him. Emily's hands shook as she pressed against the wound, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken since childhood. "Stay with me," she begged. And in that desperate moment, she realized something. She couldn't keep running and letting others pay the price. She had to fight. Rehook. What would you do if your secret was the reason good men bled and sacrificed their lives? Would you finally stand, or would you keep running? The final confrontation came in an abandoned warehouse where the mercenaries thought they had trapped them. The smell of rust and gasoline filled the air, the floor slick with rain from a broken skylight. Emily's pulse thundered as she stepped forward, not hiding this time, but carrying the piece of evidence her father had once protected, a drive that could expose the entire network. The mercenaries closed in, their leader smirking as if victory was already his. But Emily's voice didn't shake when she spoke. "You destroyed my family. You chased me to the ends of the earth. But tonight, it ends." The battle that followed was chaos. Gunfire, shouts, the echo of boots on metal. Marcus fought like a storm, brutal and unyielding. But it was Emily who made the final move. When the leader reached for her, she didn't cower. She stood her ground, using the evidence as bait, drawing him close enough for Marcus to strike the final blow. And in that moment, the weight of years lifted. She wasn't just a runaway waitress anymore. She was Elizabeth Hayes, survivor, fighter. When it was over, the mercenaries lay defeated, the drive secured, and the dawn broke through the warehouse windows, painting the floor in gold. Emily collapsed into Marcus's arms, not from fear, but from the sheer relief of finally stopping the cycle of running. Days later, the diner reopened, the bell above the door jingling like nothing had changed. But everything had. Emily poured coffee with steadier hands now, a quiet strength in her eyes. The seals had gone back to their world, carrying her gratitude with them. But Marcus left her with one promise. You don't have to hide anymore. Not from them. Not from yourself. And as the small town woke to another ordinary day, Emily Carter, no, Elizabeth Hayes, knew the truth. She wasn't defined by the secrets she carried, but by the courage she found when the past finally caught up. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of the doors swinging open, because she knew, whatever walked in, she could face it.